Iowa football got huge news out of the college football playoff rankings as the disrespect is not going to continue with the Iowa Hawkeyes as they are ranked in the top 20 of the college football playoff rankings that were released on Tuesday night. This is great news for Iowa. This is great news for Iowa fans as it does present the opportunity now to make it into the college football playoffs, maybe with just a win over Oregon, but not just with a win over Oregon, over another team in USC as well. We're going to talk about it all, kind of go through their path, kind of go through the odds of them getting those wins, what the projections are looking like right now, and then also talk about this team and if they can actually make that happen. So we are here on JR's Big Ten football news and rumors, and the news right now is that Iowa has a legitimate shot to make the college football playoffs as long as they take care of business in front of them. Now, early on in the season, you had Iowa State, that game losing to them. It looked like this was not going to be maybe the playoff season that some Iowa fans had hoped for. Still opportunity for a good season, but we still thought Penn State was amazing on the schedule leading up to it. We still thought Oregon was going to be a juggernaut team. Oregon has since fallen to Indiana. They look a whole lot more susceptible, especially coming into Kinnick. And then obviously Iowa took care of Penn State, still a very talented team and still a team that Iowa needs to get credit for getting that win, even if it might not be a team with a great record now in all of college football. So let's look at the college football playoff rankings here first. Ohio State, Indiana at 1 and 2. That's no surprise. That is good for the Big Ten. It shows that there is not, a bias against the Big Ten all that much. But the bad news for the Big Ten is that Oregon was ranked 9th. And the issue with Oregon being ranked 9th is that Oregon is kind of that staple team for a lot of these Big Ten teams to be able to beat them and then get into the college football playoffs. There is some thought process out there that if a team like an Iowa or a USC beats Oregon, they might be able to make the college football playoffs even if they lose to another team but win the rest of their games with some of the parity and stuff happening in college football. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to handle all of that on their own. They wouldn't control their own destiny, but with some luck, they might still be able to get in there. Unfortunately, it looks like you're going to have to beat Oregon. It doesn't look like Oregon is the type of team that's going to be able to make it in at 9 and 3 as they might have been before, but they still could make it in at 10 and 2, especially if your team is able to get up there. But today we're specifically talking about Iowa, and Iowa was given credit being ranked over Michigan as they deserve to be. They have crushed teams. They have not struggled with teams. They've not been kind of a different team on the road than they were at home. You could say that they struggled on that Rutgers game, and there were struggles with the defense in that one, but also the defense adjusted and played really well in the second half to lead them to that win. And that was still a young defense who was trying to get themselves, kind of coalescing and playing together. And now you look at this Iowa team after the Penn State game, after the Minnesota game, and this looks like a really, really special defense at this point that's going to give Oregon all they can handle in Kinnick on this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. Well, 3:30 Eastern time. Those of you over in Iowa, 2:30 for you. But this is going to be a really interesting matchup and a really interesting path for Iowa to be able to get to the playoffs. Let's go ahead and look at their spot in the rankings. They are right behind USC, right in front of Michigan. That tells us that right now they are not valuing a 2-loss Big Ten team the same as they are valuing a 2-loss SEC team with Texas and Oklahoma and Vanderbilt all above them. And they're not valuing a 2-loss Big Ten team as much as some, but not all, 2-loss Big 12 teams where Utah is all the way up there at number 13. I think that's pretty crazy that you have them up there like that, but it does mean that they have them in a similar range with a team like Miami, who has shown at times to be a very good team this season, but has some losses that are a little, just they shouldn't have happened for Miami, quite frankly, with the talent they have on their team. So let's look at this Iowa schedule moving forward. Iowa has 4 final games of the season, and there are 3 pretty difficult ones, 2 mainly difficult ones, and then 1 that is a rivalry game on the road. Iowa is very good at winning their rivalry games, so I do think they have a good chance there, and obviously with the starting quarterback being out. But let's go ahead and look first at Oregon. So Oregon this weekend at Kinnick on FanDuel, it looks like a 6.5 spread. in that one. Well, I know another team that was that Oregon was favored by 6.5 over, and that was the Indiana Hoosiers. So doesn't mean just because there's a 6.5 spread that Oregon's going to win this game, especially with Oregon having to come into Kinnick and Oregon, I believe, having the advantages on the trenches to do that. But I do think that if Iowa wins this game against Oregon, I do think they're going to need a little bit of help with some other teams losing. Oklahoma probably needs to lose to Alabama, and Texas probably needs to lose to either Georgia or Texas A&M. If Texas beats either of those two teams, I think you could look at a scenario where Texas is most likely ranked over Iowa, with both of those teams being ranked pretty, multiple spots above Oregon, especially with Georgia being one on the road and Iowa playing this Oregon game at home. So you do need a little bit of help. However, if you get the win at USC, that should be enough to propel you forward to hopefully stay above a Texas team, right? Texas might propel above you with a win over Texas A&M or a win at Georgia, but you would hope that team in Texas A&M or Georgia would move down below Iowa, because that Georgia team would not have, the greatest win in the world to be able to get up there. Let's look at Georgia's schedule really fast. So Georgia has wins over at Tennessee, who is ranked 25th in the college football playoffs right now. Really don't deserve to be ranked that high. Tennessee doesn't really have any signature wins to be able to be ranked that high, but of course they're going to put them there because of the SEC bias. And then they have a win over Ole Miss at home, where they only won that game by one score. Now, Ole Miss is ranked number 6 in the college football playoff rankings, so that does give you concern there. However, I think if Georgia loses and they have 2 losses, Ole Miss has 1 loss, you would see Ole Miss elevated up, but you would not see Georgia have to stay in front of them, especially since they're right next to each other right there. So it's a very interesting situation to see how this is going to play out. When you look at the teams that Iowa could beat, when you look at the rankings the way they are right now, if Iowa beats Oregon, you would think that Iowa would then be uplifted ahead of Oregon, most likely around 13 or 14. You would most likely see Oregon move up ahead of Utah, or Iowa move up ahead of Utah, and Oregon move down below Iowa, and probably be in that range right there, because it's what they're doing with oftentimes these teams having similar records, being from the same conference and having wins over each other. You see it with Texas, Oklahoma. You see it with Georgia, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss. You see it right here with even a matchup between BYU and Texas Tech. I don't think they're going to do that. You're probably going to see the other one drop down a little bit more, but you're most likely not going to see Iowa go over whichever team loses that BYU and Texas Tech game. That's where you're going to need to see Texas and Oklahoma most likely lose. Now, you get the win at USC, and there's definitely some thought process there that if Iowa gets the win over at USC, they could leapfrog Oklahoma and Texas. However, there is the issue of the SEC bias going on right now about the SEC's 2 loss teams being so much higher than the Big Ten's 2 loss teams. I think if Iowa gets those 2 wins, those are 2 better wins than what Texas has right now, and that should put them up over Texas. And even with Texas and Oklahoma most likely losing, that's going to bring them down as well. So again, if you are Iowa, you want to obviously beat Oregon. You want to see Texas and Oklahoma both lose to Georgia and Alabama. That's most likely going to happen. You want to beat USC as well, obviously, and then you want for there to be as little parity at the top as possible, because you just want to be able to get in there. You don't want to mess with a situation where Alabama or Oklahoma beats Alabama, because then you're not guaranteed to go over Alabama in that scenario. They have their whole ranked wins thing, which is kind of bullcrap, but it is what it is. So that's really the biggest thing you're facing right now with Iowa. Give me your thoughts in the comments section. Do you think if Iowa beats USC and Notre Dame, they have to beat Notre Dame. I think they could beat Notre Dame. But if Iowa beats at USC and Oregon, do you think they're a lock to be in the playoffs? Do you think that they kind of need, less parity to happen so that way Alabama and Georgia take care of business, Texas A&M take care of business? What are your thoughts on how that might work out? The biggest issue here for me is the disrespect that Oregon is getting in the polls right now, because I do think if Iowa gets that win this weekend, I don't think it propels them into the top where they should be if that happens. So we'll see how it plays out. Obviously, the last two games for Iowa are Michigan State and at Nebraska. I think they win both of those games. I would not completely discredit Nebraska as it is a rivalry game, but with Nebraska not having Dylan Raiola, TJ Lateef looking the way he did in that USC game, I'm going to say I don't feel super confident in Nebraska from the beginning to get the win over Iowa, and so I definitely don't feel confident in them doing that now either. What are your thoughts? Give me what you're thinking in this whole scenario, and we'll chop it up in the comments. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.